right, guys. Today we are going to talk about all of the different variables with exhaust tips, different cars, how to get them
Some.
on there, if
We'll
they
probably
matter, if they
forget
don't. We're
some.
gonna forget stuff. There's
Yeah.
a lot going on there. We don't have a script either.
No. Ever.
Probably one of the most common questions we get is do exhaust chips affect the sound?
Not really. No.
Yes and no, though. I feel like
They
if
look
you
cool.
if you just put an exhaust tip on there, it's gonna do nothing. Okay. I don't think exhaust tips start doing anything really until you've got a fairly open exhaust.
Yeah, and then you gotta go bigger
Right, they have to be significantly different.
because size matters. Just saying.
I mean, there's a big difference between like a 3 inch
Yeah.
exhaust tip and like a 6 inch exhaust tip.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd go with the 6.
yeah,
Anyways.
yeah.
Uh also
Typically, a tip that is significantly bigger, volume wise. It doesn't matter if it's really long and 4 inches wide or like one of the big truck diesel tips. We're gonna have just a whole bunch of really inappropriate innuendo in this. I can already tell.
it's great.
It's so
It's
bad.
so good.
If it's significantly bigger, it's gonna have a deeper tone to it, and that's a trick that we use on a lot of smaller displacement cars.
Yeah.
We'll do
Again, in tandem with other exhaust modifications.
right.
Not just changing out the
Not
tip.
just changing out the exhaust, and we're talking about this could be a V6, and we do like a pretty decent muffler on there, Borla or Corsa or Magnafleet, something with
Sure.
some packing or something, right? And instead of putting, like a 4 inch long exhaust tip, that we typically find on the car, we'll bury like a really long one under there. And then the effect is that the last 2 feet of the exhaust are like 4 or 5 inch
Yeah.
pipe because
Yeah.
it's just a giant truck tip that's
Yeah.
that's buried under there. And that way we get a deeper tone.
Yeah.
The longer, bigger ones can also have more like pops and bangs.
Mm-hmm.
That's a result of reversion, right? When you let off the gas, there's less pressure in the pipe. Clean air comes back in, it lights it up. Again, it's not going to do that all on its own, all right? If you've already got a car that wants to pop and crackle when you shift and all that fun stuff, a significantly bigger tip can make a difference. But, if you've got a smaller one on there, an inch bigger is not going to matter.
No, it's
You
not
know,
gonna make that much
If I
difference.
put a 4 inch tip
It
on
would
there and
be
it's got three,
negligible.
yeah, that's gonna be cosmetic at that point.
But that's a common misconception is a lot of people will message us about just changing the tips and how is that gonna make my car sound?
Right,
It's gonna sound exactly the way it sounds now.
more or less.
Yeah.
Um,
Unless you did some ridiculous things,
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, the placement can matter, but that's again more due to the placement. And I'm thinking more of like doing a dump on a truck, right?
Well, sure.
Versus, coming straight out of the back. But even with the same tip, that's going to sound different because
Yeah.
of the exit, right? It really
The
sounds
length of
different
the
because the length of the exhaust, the fact that you're slamming it on the ground and bouncing it back up, it's a different tone. But I guess that really brings us to another good point is the placement of the tip, the actual exit of the exhaust. That does matter.
Yeah.
Because I've done
A lot.
dozens of setups on every vehicle I've owned, probably.
Yeah.
I can't leave stuff alone, but also it's part of the R&D process. How many different sounds and tones can we get out of the same engine? If I like this sound, what can I do to get a little bit more of that? We've really learned a lot just experimenting with, an identical car over and over and over and over again.
Yes.
I've had door dumps on, what was it?
The Rebel.
The Rebel, yeah. Literally, I just had a dual exhaust with no crossover that split out either side underneath the front doors, and that was
On each side, yep. Brutal.
yeah, but there was like no
You also
drone.
didn't have cats on that.
No,
Allegedly.
allegedly, but it wasn't as bad as say a dump, right? As far as
That's
the
true.
drone and actual interior resonance, the
There
exhaust
was
was
no-
so short, it was just
Yeah.
loud, but we didn't get that interior vibration going.
Yeah.
And
It's also a much newer vehicle, so it already had all kinds of the door
well,
seals.
but
were
you
done,
remember
etc.
I had another setup on that truck. It was a dual exhaust with some really big exhaust tips that were dumped under the truck, and that was when we set the car alarm off on the Tesla at the Home Depot.
Yeah.
You remember? And I just fired it up, and for whatever reason, that was just like the car alarm setting off setup with that
was
truck.
the one, yeah.
And those tips weren't any. I mean, they were bigger than the ones that were coming out from underneath the door, but it's
Yeah.
not like they were significantly, crazy different or anything. I had
But
side pipes.
that again is more of length,
placement.
not tip.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, correct. That exhaust
We
was
had
longer
side
too.
pipes behind the rear tire.
Um, and in front.
and in
I
front
had
of
the
the
dual
rimfire.
angled up and out.
So those were all different.
Yeah, those were all different, but that's, more of a factor due to the exit.
Yeah.
If drone is something you're concerned about or hearing a lot of the exhaust inside the car, the further back you go and the further pointed out, the better.
Yes.
If you want to hear more of it, dump it underneath the truck or car. Race turndowns are a thing, but people typically do that for weight savings.
Yeah, that could be very loud,
It's
especially depending on how low your car is.
Yeah, we've put lots of race, the low profile turndowns, we just shave them off and
Right
it
underneath
dumps
the
it.
car.
Yeah.
So loud.
We've done Chargers, Challengers, Mustangs, Camaros, and then, without fail, if it's a cammed V8, they just suck.
It sucks. It sucks
Yeah.
so bad.
So it's worth the 80 pounds, and a wide open exhaust is worth, another tenth in the quarter or whatever it is you're doing out there. But I mean, it objectively is not fun.
No.
What else we got?
I am personally not a fan of adding exhaust tips to cars that aren't supposed to have exhaust tips. Like they came with no show exhaust, and then
Mm,
you're trying to.
yeah,
It's got the smooth bumper across the
yeah.
back, and you're trying to put a tip there. I think it looks messy, cheap.
Yeah, it looks. Yeah, and we've seen lots of variations of that. But yeah, especially some of the smaller cars that had a no-show exhaust. There's lots of like Jettas and just
Yeah.
not to pick on the Jetta, but you random BMWs, whatever. There's tons of these
There's a
little
lot of
cars
cars
that have.
with no show exhaust.
But yeah, if you try and stick a round, exhaust tip on
It
a
looks
flat bumper, it
weird.
looks really weird. Sometimes we can get away with a square tip, but
Occasionally.
again, it's like where do you put that in the lineup, even if it's a single one?
The
Because
shape of the
right.
bumper makes a big difference.
And some of these hatchbacks got these crazy, like multiple angles going off in the back.
I'm not a fan. I don't like it.
Um,
I don't like it.
we typically recommend people get like a rear diffuser swap. Like if there's some version of your car that has exhaust tips, that piece of plastic's $80 on eBay. And
Depending on the car. Yeah.
depending on the car, and you some are a little more, but
Well, and then you can change too if you have a single exit on each side.
right,
There's some that you can get a dual exit
right,
diffuser for
yeah.
and do like quad tips, which is cool. But again, if you don't have a space for the tips, it looks weird if you try and add one.
Yeah,
I
and,
don't
and I'm the guy who will cut my own crappy bumper on my own crappy car, but typically your exhaust shop is not going to be insured for body work, and they're going to really not like doing that for you.
If they're
And
at all
again,
decent.
the parts, it's like $80, and then you have a real diffuser. Sometimes they're 120 or whatever. They're not expensive though, and typically it's a couple little like body pins you can break and replace, and a couple little 10 millimeters or
And that's great.
yeah, and then you've got a hole for it, and it looks like a clean finished product.
But when they just stick out funky,
I don't
not
like
a fan.
that. Same thing goes for trucks, guys. I think the dual exhaust just straight out sticks underneath the flat.
It looks dated.
It looked bad in the
It looks
90s.
bad.
It wasn't good in the
No.
90s.
And we see them all the time. And often when we see them here in Texas, they're off because
Yeah,
they've used their truck.
right.
And it doesn't look good.
No, and that'll drive me nuts.
Baling, I like the one when they're hanging up with the
The baling wire, the coat hanger, speaker wires, and all
If
kind of
you're
weird
gonna
stuff.
do something like that, like go like cowboy cut or do something that's not just
Cowboy
straight
cut,
out the
cowboy
back.
cut looks good, but the thing is we're working on the corners of the truck that way, so cowboy cut looks nice on trucks. But yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
flat bumper, round tip, just don't do it. It
Don't
looks
do it.
bad. Get something with some cutouts. If your car used to have cutouts and you want to do a no-show exhaust, the same thing is also true. You
In
can
reverse.
use in reverse, right? I really like a good flush bumper on a fifth gen Ram, and they all come with circle cutouts.
Yeah.
Some of those bumpers you can modify, and that's what I did with mine. Eventually, I had no tips back there pretty much from the start.
Yeah.
I
Like
don't think
day
I ever,
one.
yeah, I don't think I ever ran that truck with the tips out of the back. They looked really good with 5-inch tips,
Yeah, fill out the hole better.
Yeah, and that's right. I knew it. I knew we were gonna keep running into.
But when you've got a large gap around it, they look too small.
Yeah, they
I
look
like
comically
the much
small.
smaller gap around it. 5-inch tips on Chargers look really good.
Look perfect.
5-inch tips on Rams look really good.
Really good.
Even if it's just the little silver, but like it fills it out. It looks
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah,
The little one, it's comical. It's
they
weird
do
that
it all
came
the
like that.
time. I think they exercise an abundance of caution for air gap between, wherever your bumper and your exhaust tip is. It's insane. It's never going to get that hot. I don't really get the point of that. But it looks like it's undersized
Yeah.
when they have a giant cutout in the bumper that was small.
Truck. It's a big, beefy
Yeah,
truck
it's
with
it's
these
tough
teeny tiny
enough, and they
exhaust
don't
tips.
even sound like they're running anymore when they're new. They've just quieted them down so much. So, I mean, they definitely add more personality, and that's kind of, the general consensus about exhaust tips is there's lots of trickery you can have with them, but more or less it's always going to be an aesthetic thing. And to that extent, they're worth getting right. We've definitely had customers who have, switched exhaust tips after 6 months or so, and you can look at it as a few $100s. But at the end of the day, we know from experience, I've done a $3,000 exhaust, and it doesn't matter what it actually looks like underneath if the
Nobody
tips
sees
are.
that.
No, they see the tips.
Yeah.
They see the tips. So if you have an exhaust system you like, and maybe the tips are something that you don't love, don't be afraid to switch those out and try something else. Because they really do change the personality of the exhaust, right? The exhaust tip is the visual part of the sound you're hearing.
And if you care about the visual part and you don't want to clean them all the time, go with black. Just get black. They're going to turn black anyway.
But make sure you get a good one.
Yeah. Not the
with
off.
With some of the supply chain issues we've had, we've noticed that
Since
more
COVID,
and more often, exhaust tips are they're bad.
They're cheaply made sometimes.
And the coating is, I don't know if the chemical got more expensive or they ran out of it. We're seeing this from big brands. I'm not going to name any,
Some of them, those tips cost over $200, but just for the tips.
$300, and then you pay us $150 to install them, and now you're in it for $450, and you thought you bought a really nice exhaust tip.
6 months later,
and the paint's gone. And we're personal friends with a lot of people who've spent a lot of money on their cars, and this seems to be a fairly universal thing with black tips right now. I can tell you this, that the less glossy they are, the less often they flake.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's a result of, they've got to add the clear in there or whatever it is to flash it off, or more of whatever that bonding chemical is. But for whatever reason, if it's a flat black, they seem like they last. Yeah. And they're going to turn that color anyway. If you do want to keep the, like a polish tip clean, just use a heavy metal polish. We use like Eagle One, I think, is the
something like that.
Yeah, it's gonna look like cotton wadding in a tin, and you just kind of like rub it on there, and wax on, wax off type deal. But it does work. It has like some abrasive in it, some type of a stripper that gets like the soot off, but it does polish the metal.
Yes.
Yeah.
The stripper polishes.
Yeah, the stripper polishes the tip. Yeah, that's
just saying.
What else? What else with the exhaust tips?
I can't think of anything else right now.
Gosh,
they can make or break your car. If you're concerned about the aesthetics of your car, and a lot of people are, I'd put some more thought into the tips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you guys have any more questions about exhaust tips, definitely drop a comment. Let us know. Maybe we'll do another video. I guess we've already rambled for about 12 minutes in this one, so
way too long.
I feel like we've still missed stuff.
Oh yeah.
So thanks for watching, guys.